My grandmother lied about my mom's death for 15 years to keep me from finding out she was still alive. I was 3 when Grandma Rosalie sat me down with chocolate chip cookies and told me Mommy had gone to heaven. She was very sick, Grandma explained, wiping frosting from my chin. But she loved you so much and now she's watching over you from the clouds. I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? Grandma was my world, the woman who braided my hair, taught me to bake bread, and read me bedtime stories every night. When I asked why we didn't visit Mommy's grave, she'd say it was too far away. When I wondered why there were no pictures of us together, she'd claim they were lost in a fire. For 15 years, I lived with the ache of losing someone I couldn't remember. Every Mother's Day, I'd make cards for Grandma and whisper prayers to my dead mother. I'd imagine what she looked like, what her voice sounded like, whether she'd be proud of my report cards. Grandma would nod sadly and say, "She would have loved you so much." The lie unraveled on my 18th birthday. I was cleaning out Grandma's attic to surprise her. She'd been complaining about the clutter for months. Buried beneath old photo albums and Christmas decorations, I found a wooden box locked with a tiny padlock. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to Rosalie Mitchell in the same handwriting. The return address made my blood freeze. Delilah Mitchell, Riverside Correctional Facility. Mitchell was my mother's maiden name. Delilah was my mother's name. My hands shook as I opened the first letter, dated just 6 months ago. Mom, I know you probably won't read this, but I'm being released next month. I've been clean for 3 years now. I want to see my daughter. I know I messed up, but she deserves to know I'm alive. Please, just let me explain to her what happened. The letter fell from my trembling fingers. My mother wasn't dead. She was in prison, and she'd been writing letters begging to see me. I tore through the box, finding letters spanning back years. In them, my mother described getting sober, earning her GED, working in the prison library. She wrote about missing my birthdays, wondering if I'd grown tall, hoping I was happy. She enclosed drawings she'd made of a little girl who looked exactly like me at 3, but aged up through the years. The most recent letter was postmarked 2 weeks ago. Mom, I'm out now. I have a job at a diner in Millfield. I drive past our old house sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of Penelope. I know you think you're protecting her, but she's 18 now, old enough to decide for herself. I'll be at Cedar Park this Sunday at 2 p.m. like I wrote before. If she wants to meet me, I'll be there. Today was Sunday. It was 1:30 p.m. I ran downstairs, letters clutched in my fist. Grandma was in her armchair, knitting peacefully. "How could you?" I screamed, throwing the letters at her feet. Her face went white as she saw the familiar handwriting scattered across her carpet. "Penelope, I can explain. She's alive," I sobbed. "My mother is alive and you let me think she was dead for 15 years. Grandma's hands shook as she set down her knitting needles. "She was a drug addict," she whispered. "She nearly killed you both in that car accident. I was protecting you. From what? From having a mother? From disappointment," she said firmly. "From broken promises and relapses and—" I was already grabbing my car keys. "Where are you going?" Grandma called after me. "To meet my mother." Cedar Park was a 10-minute drive that felt like an eternity. My heart hammered as I pulled into the parking lot. What if she wasn't there? What if this was all some cruel mistake? But then I saw her. A woman with my exact nose and chin, sitting alone on a bench, wearing a blue dress and clutching a small wrapped box. She kept checking her phone, looking around hopefully. Even from 50 feet away, I knew it was her. Some primal recognition that went deeper than memory. I sat in my car for 10 minutes just watching her. She had my hands, long fingers that tapped nervously against her knee. My dark hair, though hers was shorter and streaked with premature gray. When she smiled at a passing dog, I saw my own lopsided grin reflected back at me. Finally, I found the courage to get out of the car. She saw me approaching and froze. Her eyes went wide, then filled with tears. She stood slowly, like she was afraid I might disappear if she moved too fast. "Penelope?" she whispered. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Look at you. You're so beautiful. You're so—" She stopped herself, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I practiced what I'd say 1,000 times, but now I can't remember any of it." We stood there for a moment, two strangers who shared everything and nothing. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the wrapped box with shaking hands. "I know it's silly, but I've been buying you birthday presents every year, keeping them in my cell, then my apartment. This was supposed to be for your 18th. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small bird pendant. It's a swallow," she explained. "They always find their way home no matter how far they travel." I hoped, maybe someday. "It's perfect," I managed. She helped me put it on, her fingers gentle at the back of my neck. When she finished, she stepped back and really looked at me. "You have your father's eyes," she said softly. "I don't know who my father is," I admitted. "Grandma said he died too." My mother's face darkened. "He's not dead. He's just a coward who ran when things got hard. But that's not important right now." She gestured to the bench. "Will you sit with me, please?" We sat side by side and she began to tell me the truth. "I was 22 when I had you," she said. "Young, stupid, and completely unprepared. Your father, Camden, was charming and exciting and everything I thought I wanted. But he was also dealing drugs out of our apartment." She stared at her hands as she spoke. "I tried to leave him when I found out I was pregnant, but he convinced me to stay. Said he'd go straight, that we'd be a family. Instead, he got me addicted to keep me dependent on him. The car accident? You were 3. I was high. So high I could barely see straight. But Camden needed me to pick up a package across town, and I was too scared to say no. I put you in your car seat and drove." Her voice broke. "I ran a red light. Hit another car. The other driver was okay, thank God. But you had a concussion, internal bleeding." I remembered nothing about that day, but I unconsciously touched my ribs where a faint scar still marked my skin. "When the police searched our car, they found the drugs. I was arrested at the hospital while you were still unconscious. Your grandma had to fight CPS to keep you out of foster care. How long were you in prison? 12 years initially. I got out early for good behavior, but violated parole within 6 months. She looked ashamed. Camden showed up at my halfway house. Convinced me to help with one more job. Just one, he said. Then we'd disappear together and come get you. But you didn't. I got caught. Went back for another 3 years. She turned to face me fully. But those 3 years saved my life. I got clean for real this time. Did programs, therapy, got my GED, started writing to you through your grandma. She never told me. I know. She wrote back once, told me you were happy and healthy, and that I should leave you alone. Let you believe I was dead so you could have a normal life. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have stayed away. No, I said firmly. I deserved to know. We talked for 3 hours on that bench. She told me about prison, how she'd worked in the laundry, taken college courses, helped other women learn to read, how she'd covered the walls of her cell with pictures she'd drawn of me, aging me up year by year based on her memories. I told her about school, my friends, how grandma had raised me, how I'd always felt like something was missing but could never name what. When the sun started setting, she walked me back to my car. Can I see you again? She asked hesitantly. Yes, I said without hesitation, but I need to talk to grandma first. The drive home was surreal. Everything looked the same, but I felt completely different, like I'd been living my life slightly out of focus, and suddenly everything had snapped into clarity. Grandma was waiting in the living room when I walked in, the letters gathered in a neat pile on the coffee table. How was she? Grandma asked quietly. Different than I expected, I said, sitting across from her. Older, sadder, but not the monster you made her out to be. Grandma's face crumpled. I was protecting you. From what? Exactly? From having a mother who loved me enough to get clean? Who wrote me letters for years hoping I'd forgive her? You don't understand, Grandma said desperately. She broke promises over and over. I'd set up visits when you were little and she wouldn't show up because she was high. You'd sit by the window in your best dress waiting for a mommy who never came. This hit me like a punch to the stomach. What visits? Grandma covered her face with her hands. Before the accident, when she was in jail the first time, before prison, they had family visiting days. She'd promised to come see you and I'd get your hopes up, but she'd miss them to get drugs smuggled in, or she'd be in solitary for fighting. How many times? 7. 7 times I told you mommy was coming, and 7 times I had to explain why she wasn't there. You stopped sleeping for weeks after the last one, just stood at the window every day, asking when she was coming. I felt the weight of those forgotten disappointments settling in my chest. Part of me understood why Grandma had done what she did, but that was 15 years ago. I said finally. She's different now. How do you know? Grandma asked. People don't change, Penelope. Not really. Because I spent 3 hours with her today, and she could have made excuses or blamed you or tried to turn me against you. But she didn't. She took responsibility for everything. She said you did the right thing raising me. Grandma looked surprised by this. She's not asking to replace you, I continued. She knows that's impossible. But I need both of you in my life now. I need to know where I came from. Over the next few months, I slowly built a relationship with my mother, whose name I learned was actually Delilah Rose, not just Delilah. She'd started using her middle name in prison because there were too many Delilahs, and it stuck. She picked me up for coffee every Saturday, always exactly on time. She remembered every detail I shared about my life and asked thoughtful follow-up questions the next week. When I mentioned struggling with chemistry, she brought me her old textbooks from the prison college program. I studied to be a lab tech, she explained. Thought maybe I could work in a hospital someday, help people instead of hurting them. She was working double shifts at the diner to save money for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Her goal was to eventually take some college courses and maybe become a counselor for people with addiction. I want to help other mothers get back to their kids, she said. Turn all this pain into something useful. The strangest part was discovering how similar we were. We both hummed when we were nervous, preferred our coffee with too much sugar, and had the same habit of biting our lower lip when concentrating. She knew instinctively that I was left-handed before I mentioned it, and I found myself laughing at her jokes before she finished telling them. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. 3 months into our relationship, she missed our Saturday coffee date. When I called, her phone went straight to voicemail. Panic consumed me, all of Grandma's warnings about disappointment flooding back. I drove to her apartment and found her sick with the flu, alone and too proud to ask for help. I didn't want you to see me like this, she said weakly from her couch, surrounded by tissues and empty soup cans. You think I'd stop talking to you because you have the flu? I think you'd realize your grandma was right, she admitted, that I'm just going to let you down eventually. I stayed the whole weekend, bringing her medicine and making soup. We watched old movies and she told me stories about her childhood, how her own mother had died when she was 16, leaving her to raise herself. I was so angry, she said, at her for dying, at the world for being unfair. That's when I started using. It was easier than feeling everything. What changed? I asked. You, she said simply. In prison, I had this picture someone took of you at Christmas when you were 4. You were laughing at something Grandma had said, and you looked so happy. I realized that if I kept using, I'd never see that smile again. I'd lose the only good thing I'd ever done. That's when I truly forgave her. The confrontation with Grandma came 6 months later. I'd been splitting my time between them, still living with Grandma but spending weekends with my mother. Grandma grew increasingly cold as my relationship with my mother strengthened. She's manipulating you, Grandma said one evening over dinner, making you feel sorry for her with all these sad stories. They're not stories, I replied. They're her life, our life, the life you kept me from understanding. I gave you a better life, Grandma snapped. A stable home, good schools, everything she couldn't provide. And I'm grateful for that. But you also lied to me every single day for 15 years. Because she didn't deserve you, Grandma exploded. She chose drugs over her own child. She could have gotten clean earlier. She could have tried harder. Like you tried harder to help her. Grandma went silent. I read all her letters, I continued. The ones where she begged you to let her see me, where she sent money from her prison job for my birthday presents, where she asked if you'd at least tell me she was alive and sorry. She was in prison, Penelope. Prison. For addiction. For making mistakes when she was barely older than I am now. But she paid her debt. She got clean. She changed. And you still couldn't forgive her. That's when Grandma broke down and told me the real reason. She killed my son, Grandma whispered. I stared at her in confusion. What? Your Uncle Timothy. He was my youngest. 25 years old, working as a paramedic. Her voice shook with decades of suppressed grief. He was dating your mother before she met Camden. Sweet, innocent relationship. But Camden introduced her to drugs, and she introduced Timothy to them. My world tilted sideways. Timothy overdosed 3 months before you were born. The drugs came from Camden, but your mother was the one who brought Timothy to that world. I blamed her for his death. I felt like I was drowning. Does my mother know? I told her at Timothy's funeral, said I never wanted to see her again. That's when she moved in with Camden permanently. Grandma wiped her eyes. When you were born, Timothy's death was still so fresh. I could barely look at her without seeing my dead son. But you took care of me anyway. Because you were innocent, and because you were all I had left of Timothy's bloodline. He always said he wanted to be your uncle. Everything made horrible sense now. Grandma's protectiveness, her inability to forgive my mother, her willingness to lie about something so fundamental. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't want you to hate her for my grief, Grandma said. Timothy's death wasn't entirely her fault, but I needed someone to blame, and she was there. I spent the next week processing this revelation. When I finally told my mother about Uncle Timothy, she broke down completely. I never knew he died, she sobbed. I was in jail when it happened. Camden told me Timothy had moved away and didn't want to see me anymore. She'd loved my uncle, it turned out. He'd been her first serious boyfriend, and she'd never understood why he'd suddenly cut contact when she was arrested. I would have gotten clean sooner if I'd known, she said. Timothy was the only person who ever believed I could be better. That's when I realized that everyone in this story had been operating with incomplete information. Grandma thought my mother knew about Timothy's death and chose drugs anyway. My mother thought Timothy had abandoned her, and I'd been caught in the middle of their mutual pain. The healing didn't happen overnight. I arranged a meeting between them, the first time they'd been in the same room in 18 years. It was awkward and painful, but necessary. Grandma apologized for lying to me but not for keeping my mother away. My mother apologized for everything. The addiction, the accident, the years of broken promises, and most importantly, for Uncle Timothy's death. I introduced him to that world, she said. Even if I didn't force the needle in his arm, I carry responsibility for what happened to him. Grandma cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry. They didn't become friends, but they reached an understanding that I needed both of them, and their grief couldn't keep me from having a complete family. Now, 3 years later, my life looks completely different. I live in my own apartment but have dinner with Grandma every Sunday and see my mother twice a week. They attend my college graduation together, sitting on opposite sides of the auditorium but both cheering when I walked across the stage. My mother got her dream job as an addiction counselor and helps other parents in recovery reconnect with their children. She's been clean for 6 years now. Grandma is dating a widower from her church, a man who lost his daughter to addiction and understands complicated forgiveness. I'm studying social work, inspired by both their stories. I want to help families torn apart by addiction and trauma find their way back to each other. The most surprising development came last year. I was cleaning out more boxes in Grandma's attic when I found a photo album I'd never seen before. Pictures of my mother and Uncle Timothy together, laughing at a picnic, dancing at someone's wedding, making faces at the camera. In every photo, they looked genuinely happy and in love. The last photo showed them with Grandma at Christmas, all 3 of them smiling. On the back, Uncle Timothy had written, "The 3 most important women in my life." I brought the album to my mother, who broke down when she saw it. "I'd forgotten how happy we were," she said, before everything went wrong. That night, she called Grandma for the first time since our confrontation. "I thought you might want to see these," she said, bringing the album over. They spent 3 hours looking through the photos together, crying and sharing memories of Uncle Timothy that they'd both tried to forget. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was the beginning of something that looked like peace. Last month, on what would have been Uncle Timothy's 40th birthday, the 3 of us visited his grave together. My mother brought flowers. Grandma brought his favorite candy. I brought a letter I'd written to the uncle I never got to meet. As we stood there, I realized that truth doesn't always set you free immediately. Sometimes it just gives you the tools to build your own freedom, piece by piece. My mother had been right about one thing. Swallows always find their way home. But sometimes home isn't a place you return to. Sometimes it's a place you have to build from scratch, using the broken pieces of what came before. I wear the swallow necklace every day now. Not because I believe in destiny or fate, but because it reminds me that finding your way home is a choice you make over and over again. And I choose my complicated, imperfect, hard-won family every single day.